Naomi, 16, sat at her usual spot in the bustling cafeteria of Lincoln High School in Portland, a haven she had carved out in a school where she was one of the few black students. Her favorite seat by the window gave her a glimpse of the school's green lawn, a rare escape from the uneasy tension she often felt. Today, however, the sanctuary was shattered when a burst of laughter erupted from a nearby table. It started with Logan and Savannah, two popular seniors whose presence dominated the cafeteria. Their voices carried easily across the room. At first, Naomi tried to ignore them, focusing on her lunch and scrolling through her phone. But then she heard it, a snide comment from Logan about melanin being the next camouflage trend. Savannah chimed in, her voice dripping with mockery. "Naomi, do you get discounts on sunscreen? Oh wait, you don't even need it, do you?" The laughter that followed was louder than any Naomi had heard before, or maybe it just felt that way because it was aimed at her. She froze, her heart racing as the comments escalated. One of Logan's friends, Danny, leaned forward, smirking. "You must save so much money not having to buy foundation. God gave you a permanent shade, huh?" Naomi felt a lump form in her throat, her hands trembling as she clenched her fork. Around her, some students whispered, a few casting sympathetic glances her way, but none intervened. She could feel the heat rising to her face, the humiliation of being targeted so publicly. As if sensing her discomfort, Logan added fuel to the fire. "Savannah, be careful. She might blend into the night if the lights go out." He slapped the table and his group roared with laughter. Naomi stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. She glared at them, her voice shaking but firm. "You think this is funny?" The table quieted for a moment before Savannah shrugged, her voice laced with feigned innocence. "Oh, come on, Naomi. Don't be so sensitive. It's just a joke." Naomi's hands balled into fists, her mind racing with retorts that never quite made it to her lips. She turned and left the cafeteria, her footsteps echoing in the silence that followed her departure. The stairs burned into her back as she pushed open the double doors and made her way to the bathroom. Inside, she locked herself in a stall and sat down, her breath coming in shaky gasps. The cruel words replayed in her mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. After a few minutes, the door creaked open, and Naomi heard the hesitant voice of a classmate, Emma. "Naomi? Are you okay?" Naomi didn't respond. She didn't know Emma well, and the last thing she wanted was pity. But Emma persisted. "I'm sorry for what they said. It's disgusting and they're wrong." Naomi unlocked the stall and stepped out, her eyes meeting Emma's. There was genuine concern there, but also awkwardness, as if Emma didn't quite know what to say. Naomi appreciated the gesture but couldn't shake the sense of isolation. "Thanks," Naomi muttered before leaving the bathroom. She spent the rest of the day avoiding eye contact, her mind consumed with thoughts of whether things would ever change. The cafeteria buzzed with the hum of lunchtime chatter, but Naomi's focus was fixed on the cruel smirk spreading across Logan's face. His voice sliced through the air, sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Too dark, isn't it?" Logan sneered, leaning back in his chair with a self-satisfied grin. The room fell quiet, conversations dropping mid-sentence as heads turned toward Naomi. The silence was heavy, oppressive. She felt every eye on her, every judgment hanging in the air like a thick, choking fog. Her heart pounded, but this time, something deep inside her stirred, a refusal to be humiliated any longer. Naomi stood slowly, her chair screeching against the tiled floor as she pushed it back. She turned to face Logan, her hands trembling but her resolve steady. "What's your problem?" Her voice was strong, defiant, carrying across the room with a clarity that surprised even her. Logan's friends, Savannah and Danny, exchanged amused glances, nudging each other as if Naomi's challenge was just another joke. Savannah tilted her head and smirked. "Wow, Naomi's got an attitude today. Must be all that built-up anger." "Anger?" Naomi shot back, her voice rising. "You think it's okay to humiliate me, to make me the punchline of your sick jokes? You don't even know me." Logan's grin widened. "Relax, Naomi. Can't you take a joke?" Or is your skin too thick for that too? His words were met with laughter from his table, loud and derisive. Naomi felt a flush of heat crawl up her neck, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. She glanced around the cafeteria, searching for even one ally among the crowd. Emma was there, standing by the milk counter, her face pale and her fists clenched. But she didn't move, didn't speak. No one did. Savannah leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping on the table. It's not our fault you can't fit in, Naomi. Maybe if you smiled more, or, I don't know, tried to be less. The laughter roared again, echoing off the walls. Naomi's stomach churned, but she clenched her jaw and stood taller. You think you're better than me? She demanded, her voice cracking slightly. You think tearing me down makes you superior? It doesn't. It just makes you cruel and ignorant. Danny raised his hand mockingly, as if to block the imaginary blows of her words. Whoa, someone's on a soapbox. What's next, Naomi? A speech about how we're all supposed to hold hands and sing Kumbaya? More laughter. More humiliation. Naomi's hands were shaking now, and her breathing felt labored. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, the loneliness of standing up to them in a room full of people who refused to intervene. Enough, a voice rang out suddenly, cutting through the chaos. Emma stepped forward, her cheeks flushed with anger. She walked past tables of stunned students, planting herself firmly between Naomi and Logan's group. This isn't funny, Emma said, her voice trembling but firm. You're disgusting. All of you. How dare you treat her like this? Savannah raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. Emma, we're just joking. Lighten up. Joking? Emma snapped. This isn't a joke. This is racism. You're bullying her because of her skin color, and everyone here is just letting it happen. The cafeteria was silent again, but this time, the tension was palpable. Emma's words hung in the air, challenging everyone who had laughed, who had watched, who had done nothing. Logan rolled his eyes and stood, towering over both Naomi and Emma. Look, no one asked for your opinion, Emma. You're just making this a bigger deal than it is. No, Naomi said, stepping beside Emma. Her voice was quieter now but steady. You made it a big deal when you decided to treat me like I'm less than you because of the color of my skin. You made it a big deal when you thought you could humiliate me and get away with it. For a moment, Logan seemed taken aback, his smug demeanor faltering under the weight of their combined defiance. But then he scoffed, shaking his head. Whatever. If you can't handle the heat, maybe you should eat somewhere else? Naomi stared at him, her expression hardening. Oh, I belong here just as much as you do. And I'm not going anywhere. Emma crossed her arms, glaring at Logan. And neither am I. The cafeteria erupted into murmurs, the spell of silence broken. Some students glanced away, embarrassed. Others whispered to their friends, their faces uncertain. Naomi felt a small spark of hope. Maybe some of them understood, maybe this moment would make a difference. But as Logan slumped back into his chair, muttering something under his breath, Naomi knew this wasn't over. The humiliation, the tension, the pain, they wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, she felt a glimmer of pride. She had stood up, and Emma had stood with her. Naomi grabbed her tray and turned toward the exit. As she walked out of the cafeteria, Emma followed close behind, their silence a shared understanding of the battle they had fought together. Outside, the cool air hit Naomi's face, and she exhaled deeply. Thank you, she said quietly, glancing at Emma. Emma nodded. You shouldn't have to go through that alone. No one should. For the first time that day, Naomi smiled, a small, tired smile, but genuine. And for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Naomi's hands shook slightly as she adjusted her tray on the cafeteria table, but this time, she wasn't running. She wasn't letting Logan or Savannah or anyone else dictate how this moment would go. Slowly, she stood, the room seeming to tilt slightly as her heart raced, but her voice carried over the hum of whispers and murmurs. Logan, she began, her voice steady, you've got something to say about me? Fine. Let's hear it. Say it to my face, and don't hide behind your little audience. The room hushed instantly, a collective gasp rippling through the cafeteria. Logan, sitting sprawled in his seat with a cocky grin, straightened slightly. He hadn't expected this. "Say it to my face," Naomi repeated, taking a step closer. "Or maybe you're too much of a coward to back up the trash you talk." The grin on Logan's face faltered for the briefest second, but he quickly recovered, scoffing loudly. "Coward? You've got some nerve, Naomi. All I'm saying is what everyone else is thinking. I mean, look around. People are just too polite to admit it." "Admit what?" Naomi snapped, her eyes blazing. "That you think you're better than me? That my skin color gives you an excuse to belittle me? Let me tell you something, Logan. People who are confident in themselves don't need to tear others down to feel big." The words hit like a sledgehammer, and Logan's smirk froze in place. Savannah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting between Logan and Naomi. Naomi continued, her voice ringing out. "What's wrong, Logan? Insecure about something? Your grades? Your future? Or is it the fact that no one actually respects you, they're just scared of you? Does that make you feel powerful?" Logan opened his mouth to retort, but Naomi cut him off, her words slicing through the air. "Power isn't about making others feel small. That's weakness. And if you think being cruel to me or anyone else makes you strong, then you're more pathetic than I thought." The room was silent now, the weight of her words settling like a heavy fog. Naomi felt the fire in her chest grow, fueled by the raw emotion she had bottled up for so long. "And you," she said, turning to Savannah, who froze mid-eye roll. Sitting there laughing, backing him up like a sidekick in some bad movie. "Do you even know who you are without him? Or are you just another voice in the background, waiting for someone else to tell you who to be?" Savannah's face turned bright red, and she looked down at her tray, avoiding Naomi's gaze. Danny shifted uncomfortably, muttering something under his breath that no one caught. Naomi's focus returned to Logan. "What you said wasn't just a joke, and you know it. It was meant to hurt, to humiliate, and you wanted everyone to see, because that's the only way you feel important, by making sure no one forgets your name, even if it's because of garbage like this." For a moment, Logan didn't respond. His jaw tightened, and he glanced at his friends as if searching for backup, but none came. Even Savannah was staring at her lap, her confidence shattered. Naomi took a deep breath, her voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "You can keep trying to make me feel small, Logan. But I'm not the one who's afraid. That's all you." Logan finally stood, his height giving him an advantage, but Naomi didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and cold. "You think you're some kind of hero now, huh? You think people are gonna rally behind you? Guess what, Naomi, you're still just—" Naomi smiled faintly, tilting her head. "And you're still just a bully. Guess we both have to live with who we are." The cafeteria erupted in scattered whispers and murmurs, but no one dared interrupt the standoff. Logan clenched his fists, his face contorting in frustration. Emma appeared at Naomi's side, her presence a quiet but powerful statement of solidarity. "Naomi's right," Emma said, her voice steady. "You're just a bully. And we're done letting you get away with it." More whispers filled the air. Naomi noticed a few nods of agreement among the students, and the tables closest to Logan's group had begun to shuffle uncomfortably. "You don't have to like me," Naomi said, addressing the room. "But you don't get to treat me like I'm less than you just because I don't look like you. And if you think I'm going to keep quiet about it, you're wrong." The tension in the room was electric, but Naomi felt lighter somehow, as if shedding the weight of years of silence. She looked directly at Logan one last time. "Say whatever you want, Logan. It won't change who I am. But it sure says a lot about you." Logan hesitated, then scoffed loudly, grabbing his tray and stalking out of the cafeteria without another word. Savannah and Danny followed reluctantly, their earlier bravado completely drained. As the door swung shut behind them, the cafeteria buzzed back to life, students exchanging glances and murmurs. Some looked at Naomi with newfound respect, others avoided her gaze entirely. Emma gave Naomi a small smile. "You were amazing." Naomi exhaled slowly, the adrenaline fading but the sense of triumph remaining. "Thanks," she said softly. "But it wasn't just for me." They left the cafeteria together, the oppressive weight of the confrontation giving way to a sense of strength. Naomi knew the fight wasn't over. Racism and ignorance didn't vanish with one confrontation, but for the first time, she felt like she had taken a stand. And this time, she wasn't standing alone. Naomi's words lingered in the cafeteria like the echo of a thunderclap. The silence that followed was profound, the weight of her defiance and truth pressing down on everyone in the room. For a moment, no one moved, no one dared to speak. Then, as if breaking a spell, a single clap pierced the air. It was Emma, standing tall and proud beside Naomi, her hands coming together in a slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound was quickly joined by another, then another, until a wave of applause rolled through the room. It started hesitantly, as if the students were testing the waters, but it soon grew in strength and conviction. Naomi stood motionless, stunned by the response. She hadn't expected support, not like this. Her chest tightened, her heart pounding with a mix of relief and disbelief. Logan, on the other hand, froze in place. His confident smirk had long since disappeared, replaced by a rigid, blank expression. His friends, sensing the tide had turned, began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. Savannah leaned away from Logan, her carefully curated mask of indifference cracking under the pressure. She glanced at him, her lips pursed tightly. "Logan," she muttered, her voice barely audible, "I think you should stop." Logan snapped his head toward her, his eyes narrowing. "What?" he hissed, his tone low and venomous. "You're taking her side now?" Savannah didn't respond immediately, her eyes darting nervously to the other students who were still clapping. She looked as though she wanted to sink into the floor. Slowly, she pulled her chair back and stood, refusing to meet Logan's gaze. "I didn't sign up for this," she muttered, her voice trembling. "You've gone too far." Without waiting for his reply, she walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The betrayal was palpable, and Logan's face darkened with fury and humiliation. He turned to Danny, his last remaining ally, but Danny was already sliding out of his seat, mumbling something about needing to get to class. Within seconds, Logan was alone, surrounded by the silence of his own defeat. The applause finally began to die down, but the atmosphere in the cafeteria was forever changed. Students exchanged glances, some nodding in approval at Naomi, others looking away, ashamed of their earlier complicity. Emma placed a hand on Naomi's arm, her grip steady and reassuring. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Naomi shook her head slowly, still trying to process what had just happened. "I didn't do it for applause," she said softly. "I just couldn't stay quiet anymore." Logan, still standing alone, clenched his fists at his sides. His face was red with anger and humiliation, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. Finally, he grabbed his tray and stormed toward the exit, muttering curses under his breath. The door swung shut behind him, leaving a silence that felt like a release. Naomi exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like hours. One of the students from a nearby table stood and approached her cautiously. It was Liam, a quiet boy from her history class. "Naomi," he said, his voice hesitant but sincere, "that was incredible. I'm sorry for not saying anything earlier. I didn't know what to do." Naomi gave him a small, tired smile. "Thank you," she replied. "It's not easy to speak up." "I get that." As Liam returned to his seat, more students began to approach, offering words of support and apologies. Naomi listened, nodding politely, but her focus remained on the larger picture. For years, she had been silenced by the fear of standing alone. Today, she had found her voice, and it had been louder than she ever imagined. Outside, Logan paced the empty hallway, his anger simmering dangerously close to the surface. He punched a nearby locker, the metallic clang echoing through the corridor. How had this happened? He had always been the one in control, the one people feared or admired. Now, he was the one they pitted. Savannah's words echoed in his mind, sharp and cutting. "You've gone too far." He scowled, shaking his head violently. No, he wasn't the problem. Naomi was. She was the one who had made him look weak, who had turned everyone against him. He had to find a way to reclaim his reputation, to make her pay for this humiliation. Back in the cafeteria, Naomi gathered her things, ready to leave. Emma walked beside her, their steps in sync. As they reached the door, Naomi paused and turned to look at the room one last time. She saw the faces of her classmates, a mix of admiration, guilt, and quiet resolve. She saw the tables where laughter and mockery had once reigned, now subdued and thoughtful. And she saw the path ahead, not an easy one, but one she was finally ready to walk. Ready? Emma asked gently. Naomi nodded. Yeah. Let's go. As they stepped into the hallway, the sound of the door closing behind them felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Naomi didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't be facing them alone. The next morning, Lincoln High School buzzed with an unusual energy. Whispers filled the hallways, and groups of students clustered in corners, their voices low but animated. The incident in the cafeteria had become the topic of the day, spreading like wildfire through the classrooms and corridors. Naomi's name was on everyone's lips, but the tone varied: admiration from some, guilt from others, and outright resentment from a few. "Did you hear what Naomi said to Logan?" a girl whispered to her friend as they passed by Naomi's locker. "She called him out in front of everyone," the friend replied, her eyes wide. "I wish I'd been brave enough to stand up like that." Naomi overheard the exchange but kept her head down, her fingers fumbling with her locker combination. She didn't know how to feel about the sudden attention. It was strange, uncomfortable even, to be thrust into the spotlight after years of being overlooked or dismissed. Emma appeared beside her, offering a reassuring smile. "You okay?" Naomi shrugged, closing her locker. "I guess. It's just a lot." Emma nodded in understanding. "People are talking, yeah. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it'll make them think." As they walked to their first class, Naomi noticed the sideways glances and hushed conversations that followed her every step. She tried to focus on Emma's words, on the possibility of change, but the tension was suffocating. In history class, the teacher, Mr. Rowland, decided to address the elephant in the room. He cleared his throat, silencing the students who were still whispering about the cafeteria confrontation. "Before we begin today's lesson," Mr. Rowland said, his voice calm but firm, "I want to take a moment to talk about what happened yesterday. Some of you witnessed it, and I'm sure all of you have heard about it by now." The room fell silent, all eyes on him. Naomi sank lower in her seat, wishing she could disappear, but Mr. Rowland's gaze was kind when it met hers. "What Naomi did yesterday," he continued, "was an act of courage. She stood up against something that should never have happened in the first place. Racism, bullying, humiliation. These things have no place in our school or anywhere else." Logan, sitting in the back of the class, crossed his arms and glared at the floor. His face was flushed, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word, but the tension radiating from him was palpable. "I want you all to think about this," Mr. Rowland added, pacing the front of the room. "What kind of community do we want to be? One that tears people down, or one that lifts them up?" The silence in the room was heavy, and Naomi felt her chest tighten. She appreciated Mr. Rowland's support, but being the center of attention again was exhausting. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Mr. Rowland called out, "Naomi, can you stay for a moment?" Emma gave her a quick nod of encouragement before leaving. Naomi approached Mr. Rowland's desk, her heart pounding. "I just wanted to say," he began, his tone gentle, "that I'm proud of you. What you did took guts. Not everyone has the strength to speak up like that." "Thank you," Naomi said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. As she left the classroom, she ran into Liam, who was waiting outside. He offered her a small, awkward smile. "Hey, Naomi. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for not speaking up sooner. What Logan said was messed up, and I should have said something." Naomi studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Thanks, Liam. It means a lot." By lunchtime, the principal, Mrs. Grant, had addressed the entire school over the intercom. Her voice was stern but measured as she reminded everyone of the school's values. "Kindness and respect are not optional," Mrs. Grant said. "They are essential. I want each of you to take a moment today to reflect on how your words and actions affect others. This is not just about following rules. It's about being decent human beings. In the cafeteria, the atmosphere was different. The usual laughter and chatter were subdued, replaced by a mix of introspection and unease. Logan sat alone at a corner table, his friends nowhere in sight. Savannah had distanced herself completely, her gaze avoiding him whenever their paths crossed. Naomi and Emma sat together, their usual spot by the window feeling less like a refuge and more like a stage. Students occasionally glanced their way, some offering nods or hesitant smiles, others quickly looking away. "I guess this is our new normal," Emma said, trying to lighten the mood. Naomi chuckled softly. "Yeah, I'll take it over what it used to be." Across the room, Logan clenched his fists under the table, his anger simmering beneath the surface. The applause from the previous day echoed in his mind, a constant reminder of his humiliation. He felt betrayed, by his friends, by the school, even by Savannah. But as much as he wanted to lash out, to reclaim his dominance, he was stuck. The power he had wielded so effortlessly before was gone, replaced by an isolating silence. For Naomi, the day was a whirlwind of emotions. She felt pride and exhaustion, hope and trepidation. The fight wasn't over, she knew that. Change wouldn't come easily, and there would always be people like Logan who resisted it. But for now, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the strength of her own voice and the support of those who had finally found theirs. Naomi was at her locker, carefully stacking her books, when she felt someone approach. She glanced over her shoulder and froze. Savannah stood there, shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot, her arms crossed defensively. The usual confidence in Savannah's posture was gone, replaced by an air of awkward hesitation. "Hey," Savannah began, her voice quieter than Naomi had ever heard it. Naomi turned fully to face her, unsure of what to expect. "What do you want?" Savannah sighed, avoiding Naomi's piercing gaze. I need to say I'm sorry. For everything. For the jokes, for going along with Logan, for being awful." She paused, her voice cracking slightly. "I knew it was wrong. I did. But I went along with it anyway, and that's on me." For a moment, Naomi said nothing. She studied Savannah's face, searching for any trace of insincerity. All she saw was genuine regret. "Why now?" Naomi asked, her voice calm but firm. "Why are you apologizing now?" Savannah swallowed hard. "Because yesterday I saw how strong you were. How much courage it took for you to stand up to Logan. And it made me realize how weak I've been, how I let him dictate everything, even when I knew it was wrong. I'm sorry, Naomi. I really am." Naomi considered her words, her emotions swirling. She had spent so long enduring the ridicule and cruelty of people like Savannah, and now here Savannah was asking for forgiveness. "Okay," Naomi said finally, her tone steady but kind. "I accept your apology. But this isn't just about saying sorry. It's about doing better. You have to learn from this, Savannah. Words have power, and they can hurt more than you know." Savannah nodded, her eyes glistening. "I will. I promise." Naomi offered her a small, tentative smile. "Good. Because what happened yesterday wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, about what kind of people we want to be." Savannah nodded again, and for the first time, she seemed to stand a little taller, as if the weight of her guilt had begun to lift. Logan, however, was a different story. He had become a ghost at Lincoln High. The once loud, confident boy who had commanded attention in every room now slinked through the hallways, keeping his head down and avoiding eye contact. Naomi noticed him a few times, lurking at the edges of the cafeteria or rushing between classes. He never looked her way, never spoke to her. But his silence spoke volumes. The swagger was gone, replaced by a heavy, almost tangible regret. She heard whispers from his friends, or what was left of them. Logan wasn't hanging out after school anymore, and he had stopped joking around in class. Teachers remarked on his subdued demeanor, but no one pressed him for answers. Naomi didn't expect an apology from him. Part of her wondered if he even knew how to say the words. But his withdrawal from the spotlight, his retreat into silence, showed that he was aware of the damage he had caused. The school community, meanwhile, was changing. In classrooms, Teachers brought up discussions about kindness and the impact of words. Posters about respect and inclusion appeared in the hallways, and the student council organized a special assembly to address bullying and discrimination. Naomi noticed the difference in how her classmates treated her. The mocking looks and whispered comments had disappeared, replaced by nods of acknowledgement and occasional smiles. Some students even went out of their way to sit with her during lunch or partner with her in group projects. She wasn't naive enough to think that everything was perfect now. Change was slow and messy, but it was happening. And for the first time, she felt like her voice wasn't just heard, it was understood. That afternoon, Naomi met up with her best friend, Morgan, at their favorite spot in the park. Morgan had been out sick the day of the cafeteria confrontation, but she had heard all about it from their classmates. "You're a real superhero, you know that?" Morgan said, plopping down on the bench beside Naomi. Naomi laughed, shaking her head. "Hardly. I was just tired of staying quiet." "No, seriously," Morgan insisted. "You stood up to Logan. You called him out in front of everyone. Do you know how many people wish they could do what you did?" Naomi looked down at her hands, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I didn't think I could. I was scared out of my mind." "But you did it anyway," Morgan said, her voice full of admiration. "That's what makes you brave." Naomi smiled, the warmth of Morgan's words sinking in. "Maybe," she said softly. "But it wasn't just about me. It was about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. If my voice can inspire even one person to stand up, then it was worth it." Morgan grinned. "You're not just inspiring one person, Naomi. You're changing the whole school. Everyone's talking about what happened, and they're starting to think about how they treat each other. That's huge." Naomi nodded, the weight of the past few days finally feeling lighter. She wasn't alone anymore. Her voice had sparked something, and that spark was spreading. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park, Naomi felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for it. With friends like Morgan by her side and a growing community of allies, she knew she could face whatever came next.